A warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got a great podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. We have to take a look at what has been a very wild SEC tournament thus far. Some of the teams that he's starting to feel a little bit bullish/bearish on as we get into Selection Sunday. Does he think Auburn is going to be in the NCAA tournament as well? There's a lot to unpack with Blake. He does such excellent work out there in the lovely city of Nashville, and we'll chat with him in segment number 2 in the final segment. Good to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, I will give you guys this little bit of an alert with regards to the podcast. You always get picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, but on the podcast tomorrow, I do this once a year where you get the bracket reveal. I will go through with regards to both the against the spread picks for every first round matchup, and I will give you guys my entire bracket since I know that a lot of you guys are looking to fill it out. And hey, I've picked 3 out of the last 6 national champions correct, so if you've listened to the podcast over the last now 7 years, because we had one skipped year along the way, but I mean, it's actually been halfway decent with these. Knock on whatever the heck this microphone is sitting on. I believe that this is a nice wooden table. I've got a tablecloth over it, but it was a nice wooden table. Hopefully we can keep that going. So you are going to get my full bracket here. I do not post it in like picture form or anything like that. I don't want people to just blatantly steal my bracket, but if you listen to this podcast, I give out everything for free. As long as you listen here, you get the picks, you get the analysis, everything like that. That will always be honored as long as you listen to this podcast. That will be done once again. So do want to give you guys that alert. Now let's take a look back at everything that we saw on a tremendous college basketball Saturday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
In the Ivy League, it'll be Penn versus Yale that do battle for the title, as Yale in the early game, they were able to take down Cornell. If you took the early number, you might have gotten the under. On the closing number, it goes over. Yale just absolutely throttles Cornell by a count of 88-76. As for Cornell, they were trailing by 7 points at the half, despite the fact that they shot 64% from the floor. That's typically not great, to say the least. And for Yale, they've been a pretty interesting team against the spread. Just 12-14-1, but they were certainly able to cash you this ticket as they were able to go into inferno mode from 3-point range, shooting 10 of 25 from the outside. Now, they did only go 8 of 14 at the free throw line, but they win the rebound battle 38-34. Got good production out of Isaac Salazar, who supplied the team with 27 points. For Yale, they do lose the turnover battle 7-6, but they owe Cornell to going 11 out of 37 from 3-point range, so they do get the job done there. And I don't think a lot of people realize this, but Penn has actually been one of your best under teams of all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, the best. 6 overs, 20 unders, and a push, as they got it done in this one thanks to the fact that they were able to go 7 of 20 from 3-point range, while Harvard 8 of 31 from distance. And in a game that went to overtime, Harvard went 2 of 2 at the free throw line. Harvard actually wins the rebound battle 44-31, but lost that turnover battle 17-8. So that was an eye-opening game, to say the least. We had some eye-openers out there in the Big Ten. Wisconsin does not win, but they cover against Michigan 68-65, the final. For Wisconsin, they get down double figures in the second half. Looked like this game was going to go completely into the abyss, and then Austin rattles off 6 straight threes. Wisconsin as a whole, 16 out of 38 from 3-point range. They attempted 23 2-point shots, and they only hit 7 of them. So go figure there. As Michigan, they win the rebound battle 40-29, but lost the turnover battle 14-11. Yaxel Lendeborg hits a 3 in the waning seconds to be able to get Michigan the outright win, and they're going to be playing against Purdue in the Big Ten title game, who they got the win against UCLA 73-66. Now, it's dependent upon your number. This got as low as 6.5, as high as 7.5, so a little bit interesting there, but for UCLA, they were able to get some relatively good production in this one out of Eric Daly. The Daly Show was able to give you 11 points, 10 rebounds. UCLA 7 of 20 from 3, but Purdue 10 of 28 from the outside. Purdue also won the rebound battle 37-26. Did lose the turnover battle 10-6, but they were able to have a pretty solid facilitation performance from Braden Smith. Only 5 points, but 9 assists, and then Trey Kaufman, Ren, Oscar Cliff. These two guys were able to combine for 24 rebounds. You saw out there in the Big 12 final, Arizona get the job done against Houston, 79-74, the final for Arizona. 6 of 13 from three-point range. Braden Burries seems to be really picking up steam. He and Koa Pete both had 21 points to be able to lead the charge. Both teams had 8 turnovers apiece, and for Houston, Joseph Tugler, he did his part, 20 points, 10 rebounds, but Arizona, they're able to take that Big 12 title. St. John's, they take the title from UConn out there in the Big East, 72-52, the final, and for UConn, this has not been a great team against the spread thus far this season. 13-21 against the spread, and for the St. John's team, they were able to do a really nice job in terms of just holding them down and not giving them any good looks whatsoever. As for St. John's, they themselves weren't necessarily the hottest from the floor, 5 of 20 from 3, but UConn 3 of 19 from the outside. For UConn, they lose the turnover battle 17-8, and then you had 18 points apiece out of Bryce Hopkins and Zuby Ejiofor for St. John's to be able to get the job done in that one. Duke, it took everything that they had to be able to get past Virginia, but they do 74-70 the final. They're currently trying to find their sea legs as they're currently dealing with the injury to Caleb Foster, 8 of 25 from 3 from Duke, and shock, surprise, you were able to get a good performance out of Cameron Boozer, 13 points, 8 boards, 8 assists, but did not lead the team in scoring. That would actually be Isaiah Evans, who had 20 points. For Duke, they win the turnover battle 12-9. And they win the rebound battle 41-31 as Virginia goes 8 of 24 from three-point range. Malik Thomas was able to supply the team with 18 points to be able to keep them alive in this one. And then in the American Conference Tournament, you did see Wichita State set up a date to the final with South Florida. South Florida just bulldozing teams right now, 86-64. They get the win over Charlotte as Charlotte 7 of 29 from 3. 12 of 29 for South Florida as they win the rebound battle by a count of 42-36. And then for Wichita State, 81-68 all over Tulsa. Tulsa, 7 losses, probably not going to get them into the NCAA tournament. 12 of 31 from 3 for Tulsa, but how about Wichita State having Keenan Giles go into Inferno mode? 27 points. They go as a whole 12 of 26 from 3. Giles, he goes 7 of 16 from the outside, so they survive and advance. Speaking of survive and advance, UMBC, who we all remember what they were able to do in the NCAA tournament many, many years ago, now 19-11 against the spread. They survive in the America East tournament. They get the job done with a win and cover against Vermont by a count of 74-59, and DJ Turn It Up Armstrong. How about him going off for 33 big points in this game, 7 of 9 from 3. Vermont just 5 of 27 from the outside. For UMBC, they do lose the turnover battle 9-8, but they went 22 of 26 at the free throw line. If you, like me, had the under, 4 of 10 for Vermont at the free throw line. That helped out the cause. Howard is actually your best against the spread team in all of college basketball right now. 20-8 against the spread. They do not cover double figures against NC Central, but they're into the NCAA tournament, 70-63, the final. As for Howard, a double-double out of a pair of guys. Bryce Harris, 14 points, 10 rebounds. Cedric Taylor, 13 points, 12 rebounds. Howard wins the turnover battle, 13-10, and they also went 27 of 35 at the free throw line. Went just 19 of 52 from the floor, but they found a way to be able to get to the charity stripe. For NC Central, they shoot just 38% from the floor, so Howard, they are into the NCAA tournament themselves. Dayton, they're on to the Atlantic 10 final, 70-69. They take down a St. Louis team that has been one of your best against the spread teams in all of college basketball. Even with this loss and non-cover, St. Louis still has been able to make you some good money this year, 18-12-2 against the spread, but certainly waning a little bit. Dayton, they go 8 of 24 from three-point range in this game, but here's how they won the game. Turnovers, 18 turnovers for St. Louis. You had Amari McCautry supply 16 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, but 7 turnovers. Dayton as a whole, they had 8 turnovers, and they had Jordan Durcock off the bench supply 28 big points in this game, and they're going to be taking on VCU, dump trucked a St. Joe's team that had been 19-4 against the spread against Atlantic 10 teams. They were covering machines, but for VCU, they got off to something like a 32-9 lead to begin this game. They win 77-64, as for St. Joe's, they do go 10 of 28 from 3, but just 2 of 5 at the free throw line. Lost the turnover battle 9-7. They shot overall 39% from the floor, and off the bench for VCU, Terrence Hill, 8 of 10 from the floor, 18 points. VCU, they find a way to be able to get the job done out there. Utah State gets the job done. They take down San Diego State 73-62 to capture the Mountain West title, as MJ Collins, he goes off for 20 points in this game. Just 6 of 21 from three-point range for Utah State, 5 of 16 for San Diego State, and San Diego State just 27 second-half points, and they lose the turnover battle 14-6. So you've got Utah State into the NCAA tournament. The Rainbow Warriors are into the NCAA tournament as well. Hawaii, 71-64. They get the win, and for Hawaii, they have not been a solid cover team this year. They've honestly been 12-17 against the spread, but they've been a really good under team as well. How about 12 overs to 17 unders for Hawaii? So they've been able to cash you a lot of under tickets. They did in this game, and for Hawaii, they go 8 of 26 from three-point range. You had the highlight reel dunk to put an explanation on it by Dre Bullock, who had 15 points for UC Irvine. Just cold shooting in this game. They actually go 5 of 11 from 3, but they go 17 out of 50 on their 2-point shots. For UC Irvine, they lose the turnover battle 15-14. Hawaii wins a rebound battle 43-39. So they're on to the NCAA tournament. Kennesaw State, despite the fact that they lost their top scorer Simeon Cotto midseason, they take down Louisiana Tech 71-60 the final in this one, as Amir Taylor was the top man for Kennesaw State. He supplies 17 points in terms of their starters, as Jaden Harris off the bench at 18 points, 4 of 6 from 3, and that was big because the rest of the team outside of Jaden Harris, they went 1 of 13 from 3. But Kennesaw, they did a good job in terms of locking down Louisiana Tech, who went 2 of 28 from 3. DJ Dudley, he went 0 of 10 from 3, 2 of 16 from the floor for just 5 points. Louisiana Tech had their opportunities. They actually win the rebound battle 45-44, 23 offensive rebounds, just 22 made field goals. And this team, they were able to find a way to persevere, get the job done as well. Prairie View, they take down Southern by a count of 72-66. And Prairie View, don't look now, but they've been one of your best teams against the spread in all of college basketball, 21-9 against the spread thus far this season, and this is a team that's based very much on generating turnovers. In this game, they win the turnover battle 11-10 for Southern, just 5 of 19 from 3. Prairie View, they go 9 of 18 from the outside, and they go around the horn with Dante Horn, being able to supply 15 points, 5 assists. So Prairie View, they're on to the NCAA tournament. Do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, and currently as I'm doing this, Utah Valley and Cal Baptist nip and tuck 26-26. We'll know in the AM which of those teams was able to advance to the NCAA tournament, and for Akron, it was looking a little bit rough against Toledo. Down 12 at the half. They find a way, 79-76 the final. For Akron, just 10 of 34 from 3, just 3 of 9 at the free throw line, but they win the turnover battle 11-8. They win the rebound battle 37-32, and Armani Lyles was best player in this game. He had a block with 16 rebounds, 15 points, and on the flip side for Toledo, they did have Leroy Blyden Jr. supply 21 points, but for this Toledo team, losing that turnover battle, very costly to them. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a season full of unders and underdogs, as overall for the season, the underdogs are hitting at darn near 51.5%, 2,902, 2,735 against the spread, with the under rate at 50.7%, 2,861 unders, 2,777 overs, and if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, the underdogs have really been able to reign supreme. 112-94 against the spread, and the unders, they're coming through as well. 110 unders to 96 overs. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're seeing trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He's doing such amazing work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's got boots on the ground for the SEC tournament out there in Nashville, Tennessee. He does a great job looking at not just the Southeastern Conference teams, but the entire landscape of college basketball. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks always for having me, Greg.
Blake, it has been a wild SEC tournament where 3 out of the 4 teams that made the Final Four made sense because they were 3 of the top 4 seeds. And then Ole Miss somehow, some way got in there. We're not going to be seeing them in the NCAA tournament, but what have you made out of the SEC tournament? Because it was very chalky early on, but Ole Miss was able to make a nice charge, and then we saw Vanderbilt on Saturday obviously have that huge win, in my opinion, a little bit of shocking fashion over Florida.
It seems like each year there's always something like this in the SEC tournament, but of course, Ole Miss kind of makes some history as the 15 seed, winning as many games as they did, and then really
the St. Peters of the SEC.
I mean, really, right? It's like they do that, and they legitimately have a chance to beat Arkansas on Saturday. The game goes to overtime, and yeah, it was just such a great run for the Rebels. One of the better SEC tournament runs I think I've ever seen, and so kudos to them for finally figuring it out. I know it wasn't the season they wanted, but that was obviously a huge storyline this week, and their ability to knock out Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. You know, from the other standpoint of Vanderbilt, I just think that, and we'll see how this plays out, but, you know, sometimes I thought going into this matchup, it almost felt like a forgotten game when Florida won that game 98-94 the last time around when these two teams played in January in Nashville. And I just thought that the biggest question going into this one was how Florida was going to defend Vanderbilt, you know, based off of how they have to play and guard Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles. And I thought that was still kind of the story of the game here. Every pick and roll, you know, they were kind of having to choose, the big men for Florida. What do we do here? Do we help off? Do we leave someone open? And it just, Vanderbilt got so many open shots in that game. And that's going to be the thing about them in the NCAA tournament, I think, is that they run so much good stuff offensively. If they're getting open shots and making shots the way they did against Florida, they're going to be a hard team to beat. Do I think it really is an indictment on Florida? I don't, because even though the Gators didn't play too well in Nashville this week, I still think they're the kind of team that if their guard play, taking care of the ball and those kind of things, their front court's just so hard to deal with. And, you know, kind of was just the perfect storm, I thought, for Vanderbilt to just take it to Florida the way they did. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff, I think, coming out of the tournament, no matter who wins the Vanderbilt and Arkansas game for the championship on Sunday. Yeah, plenty of intrigue with the SEC heading into the NCAA tournament.
And I think that it's really interesting to take a look at Vanderbilt a little bit further, because I think that there's very clearly the 4-1 seeds as of right now. I would be very surprised if Florida's not on the 1 line, even with the loss. I don't think that Houston and UConn have shown enough to be able to knock them off. Obviously, you have from there Michigan, Duke, Arizona, but outside those 4-1 seeds, would you say that perhaps Vanderbilt has one of the best chances to be able to knock them off? Because I've noticed this with college basketball this year. Those top 4 teams are all built around their big men, and with this Vanderbilt team, they've got some of the best, for one, guard play in the country, and I think that you'd agree with this. A lot of Vanderbilt's losses came without Duke Miles in the lineup, and we're seeing just how instrumental he is to their success.
Yeah, he's huge, and I mean, I think that's where, again, it's different when you're trying to guard Vanderbilt, where you have a primary ball handler in Tyler Tanner, who can do it as well as anybody. You know, it's like if Darius Acuff doesn't play in the SEC this year, we're talking about Tyler Tanner as probably the just most standout guard, along with LeBaron Philon, of course. But that's how good Tyler Tanner is. But when you try to figure out on every possession, what are they going to do? Is it going to be in Tyler Tanner's hands? Is it going to be in Duke Miles' hands? And either way, these are 2 of the best playmaking guards, I think, in the country. And so from that standpoint, when they have Duke Miles and he stays out of foul trouble, which, you know, has been a theme every now and then, not always, but every now and then it's a big theme. You didn't have a single foul against Florida, and that was crucial. But this is a team that, like you said, when you look at kind of that stretch, you know, they lost the game against Oklahoma that made you scratch your head. They lost the game at Missouri. If he plays, you know, hey, they're probably winning both those games. And we can play the what-if game, I know, a lot. But I do think it's kind of a scenario where with those two guards playing as well as they are. And then if you can just keep the big guys out of foul trouble, it almost worked out perfectly for Vanderbilt against Florida because it seemed like all the big guys would get 2 fouls, but no one would kind of put themselves in a position where they had 3 or 4. That's going to be important. So I still think Vanderbilt is a matchup kind of team where based on their guard play, they can play with anybody. But maybe they also proved against Florida that it seemed like one of the most intimidating things for this team would be how do you face a front court like that and not let them dominate you on the offensive glass. Florida still had 20-plus offensive rebounds, but only turned into 14 second chance points. So if they start to play, let's say, a team like Arizona, something like that in the Sweet 16, it may be difficult. But I still think with what they do offensively, depending on the matchups, I think Vanderbilt has a lot of upside in this NCAA tournament.
Oh, I am in total agreement with you there, as we do have Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with the SEC tournament, it was a little bit chalky, but I think that was interesting from the standpoint of some of the bubble teams. Like, we know that Georgia should be in the field. Texas, it's very, very murky there. But, I mean, how do you take a look at this Oklahoma team? Because they were the one bubble team that felt like, oh, I don't know, actually won a game. And not just in the SEC, but nationally, all these bubble teams, whether they're in the ACC, whether they're in the SEC, whether they're in a mid-major conference, it feels like all of them upchucked all over themselves. Meanwhile, Oklahoma actually won a few games. How do you look at them going into Selection Sunday? And if they get in the field, do you think that they could be dangerous? Because they're a team I'm really starting to come around on.
They absolutely could be dangerous, I think, if they get in the field. And that's where, it's going to come down to a pretty interesting and I think very glaring choice by the committee. Because if you just compare the 2 SEC teams that have been debated the most this past 2 or 3 days, and that is Oklahoma and Auburn, there's a gap when it comes to their non-conference strength of schedule. No question. Auburn's schedule was brutal. Oklahoma's was not. But if you're looking at where these teams are now versus where they were 2 months ago, there is a huge contrast between Oklahoma and Auburn. And you're talking about an Oklahoma team who played its way potentially right there on the line and then may not get in because they lost by 3 points to what could be the SEC tournament champion on Sunday in Arkansas. And meanwhile, all they've done since then is win at Vanderbilt. They've won at Texas. They've got home wins against Auburn, against Georgia, against Missouri, against A&M, all these other bubble-type teams. They've beaten all of them. And so, yes, your full body of work should count, but I also think that right now, I think it would be an easy choice. I would pick Oklahoma over Auburn in the NCAA tournament at this second. Now, again, the last 10 games doesn't always mean what it used to, and I understand that. And you're not going to knock Auburn for what they've done the entire season as a whole. But I think that's where, to me, if you're picking a team and we're just using that question of who can be more dangerous in the tournament, I don't think there's any doubt that it's Oklahoma because they're playing better right now. They're not kind of limping into this thing the way Auburn would at this point, having lost in whatever it is, 9 of 12 or whatever at this point. Oklahoma, with their shooting and their ability to score the ball, if they were to wind up as an 11 seed in Dayton, I could absolutely see them winning a couple games and all of a sudden being a very interesting team at that point.
Yep, I'm right there with you. They're a team that I'm really starting to feel good about, so we shall see if they're going to be able to get in. Hopefully the committee does the right thing there. And man, with Auburn, when you lose 16 games, that's just rough, to say the least. But that said, in terms of just taking a look at the landscape of college basketball as a whole as well, with that loss of Florida, going back to them, because I mentioned it, they're one of the top 4 teams, in my opinion, in all of college basketball. But how do you look at them going into the NCAA tournament? Because I've been saying this, and I don't know if you agree/disagree, but out of all the teams in college basketball, I think they might potentially have the highest ceiling of all of them because the guard play has been rough, to say the least, and yet they've still had all this success. But at the same time, I think we saw it against Vanderbilt on Saturday as well, that this team could easily bow out of the tournament early because the three-point shooting just has not been there all season.
And that's the thing, is I think with Florida, I'm very high on them too, and I agree. Like they could have the highest upside of any team because you're not going to see a front court, I think, that has the dynamic that you get with Condon, Chenyolu, Thomas Houck, of course, who's basically a front court player. I mean, they're playing him at the 3, and then, of course, Mike Hanlogden off the bench. I just think that's as good of a 4 as you're going to find out there in terms of what they can do. But, their season's going to come down to the 2 guys that we've been talking about all year, and that's Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan. And, I thought against Kentucky, I thought Lee played really well in that game, and it was his court awareness, played some big plays defensively. Boogie Flan, I think, offensively right now is one of those guys that, to me, it's going to be about shot selection with him because his ability, I think, is what he can do off the dribble, and just with the way he can handle the ball and kind of put them in a position where he attacks the defense, and that allows an opening with one of the big guys, throw it up to the rim, whatever, you have to have help, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to just pure shooting, right, this is a guy that doesn't shoot the ball that well from three-point range. Same with Florida as a whole, shooting 31% now from three, 324th nationally. They're not a great free throw shooting team. There is plenty of upside with Florida. And again, this is where I hesitate to go too far in the wrong direction with the Gators, but we can say that the last 3 games or so at Kentucky, the Kentucky game in the SEC tournament, and in the game against Vanderbilt, they've not been what they were in that previous stretch of 10 games or whatever it was. Will we see this kind of be the reset you need? I think so. I think this is kind of one of those where you probably are glad you got this one out of the way, because now you can kind of refocus. Todd Golden has their attention coming off of, again, the most embarrassing loss of the season. I think that's good for Florida as they head into this tournament. But again, it is going to come down to their guard play. I think that'll determine whether they can repeat as national champions.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that that's going to be very critical, as well as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get in these final few games. We're doing this late Saturday, so there are still a few bids that are up for grabs. We want to see what Duke does with all the injuries that are surrounding them. But outside those main 4 teams, because again, I do think that those main 4 are set in stone. We mentioned a few teams. Vanderbilt was one that I mentioned that I think could be able to wreck the apple cart. But outside those main 4, are there a few, whether it's another team in the SEC, whether it's a Big Ten team, a mid-major, that you're taking a look at and you feel like they could wreak some havoc in this bracket, and you feel like they could be able to make a run with the right draw?
Well, I'm going to stick with the team we talked about last time. Nothing's changed as of this point, Greg, with Wisconsin. I still believe that, you watch the game against Michigan, you see how it played out. They came off that overtime win against Illinois. I know they've had a lot of close games here. I mean, the last 4 games have been decided by, 4 points or fewer each of them, and that's kind of tricky sometimes, law of averages. But they won 3 of them. They lose the game against Michigan. But I just like the way they play. They don't beat themselves. They're great at taking care of the ball. Obviously, they can shoot it very well. Defensively, will that eventually be their undoing? They miss a few shots. Somebody comes in and just can outscore them. Is that possible? Of course it is. But I still look at Wisconsin. And again, the tournament's about draws, and I feel like they are kind of a team that is very intriguing as we head into this thing. Another team I think that's kind of interesting in terms of where are they seated and where do they kind of wind up. South Florida, Greg, I mean, they are just an absolute, I think, juggernaut right now. And we're going to see, again, if they can lock up the AAC title on Sunday.
And if they lose, by the way, I'll throw this in here too. With all the bad bubble teams, they should be in the tournament.
I would think so. And that, again, is where you look at that. And I know you've had your heated debate, Greg, as I've enjoyed watching on Twitter with the Miami of Ohio debate when it comes to them. And I completely agree with you, by the way. But I think South Florida is a team that, and that's what I mentioned, like with these SEC teams, could one of these SEC teams see them as a 12? You better hope not. You better hope South Florida gets up to the 11, which I think they will. But let's say you're a Tennessee that gets paired with South Florida. You're another one of these 6 seeds, which I think, Greg, to me, the 6 seeds are the ones that I don't know how anyone's going to know what to do with these potential 6 seeds. If it's the group of maybe a Tennessee, a BYU, Louisville, teams like that, it's going to be very interesting to see those 6-11 matchups. So Wisconsin, South Florida, those are 2 teams that I really have my eye on because I think they can be teams when you look at how this plays out. I mean, I hope they're not paired against each other. You could have the 5-12 matchup between those 2, I guess, if it falls the wrong way. But, I think those are 2 that really have kind of caught my attention here over the past couple of weeks for sure.
Yep, I'm right there with you as well. I think that is going to be a fascination, and let's hope that South Florida is able to get into the NCAA tournament. And I'm so glad that you mentioned Wisconsin as well, a team of volatility. And how much do you take a look at these non-1 seeds that are based around guard play? And it is a little bit boom or bust because I mentioned it with Vanderbilt. They're a team that I think could be able to make a run. Purdue as well, and I think that that's what makes this year in college basketball so unique in that the best guards are on a lot of these teams that I think are going to be around like that 3 seed line, 4 seed line. Meanwhile, the 1 seeds are all based around their forwards.
Yeah, and I mean, like, here's another great example, right? How many times over the past couple of years have we talked about Alabama kind of in the same sort of sense where it's like how good they can be with their guards and their ability to make a deep run into the tournament. Of course they can because they have that 3-point shooting ability. They're led by their guards. But if you think about it, right, the reason they made the Final Four is because you had a front court guy like Grant Nelson step up and play a considerable role. Will that be the case this year for a team like Alabama with an Aiden Sherrill or something like that, because they're still going to be built on what LeBaron Philon, what Aiden Holloway, and those guys can do night in and night out. And so I think it's going to be interesting. And that's why we always say, everyone loves to say, well, this team's not going to go this far. There's no chance they can go this far. It's not until you see the matchup. Can you really know what a team can do? Because it's really going to depend on these different things. And like I said, they're going to be other ones in the NCAA tournament where it's a Vanderbilt, Florida situation where it's like Florida's been dominant, but there's a team like that that's out there that can absolutely, in the right setting, exploit a few of those weaknesses and do things that you just don't know how to adapt to necessarily, defensively or offensively. I think you're going to see that with some of these top teams still. No matter how good they are, it's going to be about matchups. And that's where I think, again, I mentioned like the 6 seeds, but I could take that, Greg, all the way to like the 3 seeds, right? When it comes to teams like Nebraska, Purdue, Illinois, like these are teams that I'm not going to sit back right now and just say I fully trust 95+%, because I think they've given us reasons to look at them and be like, okay, wrong matchup. They may be eliminated from the tournament sooner than people think.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that there's going to be a lot of fascination here moving forward. I certainly don't think we're going to get 4 1 seeds again in the Final Four. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I think that this is going to be a great tournament. Blake, I know that you're doing such amazing work over there at Southeastern 16, obviously looking at the SEC teams, but looking at just the national landscape in general of college basketball. So love to get people at home know what's on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, find all of our SEC stuff, of course, over at Southeastern 16 on YouTube. As we mentioned before, we'll be kind of expanding our coverage in the NCAA tournament, doing non-SEC stuff as well. And of course, we'll have our big bracket marathon on Sunday, as I'm sure many people will, usually a 3 to 4 hour extravaganza. Yeah, you can check that out over at Southeastern 16 on YouTube and everything else. Yeah, college basketball. Follow me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake is doing such an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by our good friend Blake Lovell, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on all 5 games that we've got on this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. Nice and easy today. We're just going in time order with these 5 games. No other bells or whistles, so we can just get right into it. 641, 642. This is Penn versus Yale out there at Newman Arena in New York, and Yale finds themselves as a 9.5 point favorite, and the total on this game is 142.5. I did set my total at a 143.5. I like the over. You've got a Penn team that is relatively mid-tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They're checking in 167th. Yale is quite the slow team, 306th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but boy oh boy, this is a Yale team that they know how to put points upon the board. Currently, they are 11th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That goes into the top 10 when they're away from home, and both of these teams have shot it really well from 3-point range. Going into the day on Saturday, Penn shooting 41.5% from 3-point range in a roadside-shoot court venue. That is number 1 in the country. Yale is 3rd in overall 3-point shooting percentage at 40%, so that does put me on the over, and I do like the points here with Penn, mainly because this is a Penn team that has been able to do the better job in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Right now for Yale, this squad is allowing teams to shoot about 34.6% from 3, 222nd in the country. Penn has been fragile on the inside. They're outside the top 285 with both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they are 60th in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 31.8%. We've got some nice headline scorers here: TJ Power, Ethan Roberts. These guys have been able to do a pretty incredible job in terms of combining for about 32.5 points per game. They both shoot over 40% from 3. Michael Zanoni has been able to shoot about 38% from 3. You've had Cam Thrower throw in there about 5 points per contest as well, so I really do like what these guys are able to bring to the table. And on the flip side for for Yale, you've been able to get really good production out of Nick Townsend. Townsend is right now shooting over 48% from three-point range, 16.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest. Isaac Salazar has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Yale is the much better team on the inside, about country average in opponent's two-point shooting percentage. They themselves are a top 100 team with their own two-point shooting percentage. If they need to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot 76% at the free throw line. And for Yale, they don't hurt themselves. They're a top 45 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Penn is more of a country average team, both in turnovers generated on a per possession basis and in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on the offensive side of things as well. Do have to note that their free throw shooting percentage is just 68.6%, but they really don't put teams on the free throw line too much with the way that this Penn defense is structured and them pushing things a little bit more to the outside. I do think that that's going to be just enough for them to remain lively here. So set a line of 7.5. I'm willing to take the points with Penn, and I do like the 142.5 to the over, so I told 143.5. 643, 644. Dayton and VCU do battle. VCU is anywhere between a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite, and total, I'm seeing it as low as a 140, as high as a 141.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay with VCU. I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite. This is a Dayton squad that's been really good at generating turnovers. They're 6th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but in games played away from home, teams are shooting 36.9% from three-point range against them. That hovers right around about 300th in all of college basketball, and this is a VCU team that's been shooting 36.5% from three. That's a top 40 mark in the country. VCU does a relatively solid job in terms of taking care of the ball. What are right around about 101st in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Do have a Dayton team that they themselves have had their issues taking care of the ball outside the top 260 in terms of turnovers per possession away from home. Dayton, a very country average team with regards to their tempo. 194th in terms of total possessions per game. VCU is more like 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for VCU, it's very much a whole is greater than sum of its parts approach with them. Meanwhile, for Dayton, you do have two main guys that really contribute for this team, as you've had Javon Bennett along Deshaun Montgomery combined for about 30 points per game. With these two guys, they combine for about 5.3 assists per game. And I will say Jordan Durcock has been coming on strong, not necessarily the biggest scorer for the Dayton team, but gives you about 9 points, 2.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. So he's just a little bit of a mixer and shaker for a Dayton team that is about country average with their three-point shooting percentage at 34.2%. Dayton's not giving themselves second and third chances. You do have Emil Latang, who gives you 6 rebounds per game, but it is a unit that's well outside the top 295 in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And VCU should have a nice advantage on the glass. You've got a guy in Lazar Djokovic with good versatility at 6'10", 14 points, 5.5 boards, and he shoots about 37.5% from three-point. Just a VCU team that overall is a top 125 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Terrence Hill leading the way in terms of scoring, typically coming off the bench with about 14 points, 3 assists, shoots 36% from three. Brandon Jennings has been their most efficient three-point shooter at about 42.5% from the outside. The likes of Nick Lewis and company are all doing a nice job mixing and shaking, and both of these teams are incredible at getting to the free throw line as well, which is a big reason why I do like the over. For VCU, 8th in the country in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. Dayton is actually 3rd. VCU about country average in terms of putting you to the free throw line, so they are going to give teams a look at the free throw line or two, and they are outside the top 150 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Dayton is another team that's about country average in terms of putting teams to the free throw line, and for Dayton, they do shoot about 75% at the free throw line. VCU a little bit closer to country average at about 74, but I do believe that with Dayton having quite a bit more down low, they're a top 55 team with their shot block percentage, that they do find a way to get the job done here. Willing to lay up to 3 with VCU, set them as 3.5 point favorite, and like the over, somebody told 143.5, 645, 646 on the card. It is Arkansas, and they're going to be battling Vanderbilt out there in Nashville, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt is a 2 to a 2.5 point favorite. 167.5 to 168.5 is the total, and I like the under. I did somebody total at a 164. Now both of these teams are looking to crank up their tempo, especially this Arkansas bunch, and Arkansas has been great on offense. Top 5 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, 17th in terms of total possessions per game. Vanderbilt, they're 44th in terms of total possessions per game, but I've just noticed that with Duke Miles back for this Vanderbilt team, who does supply you with about 2.5 steals per game, that their defense has been better, and the one thing that both of these teams have been able to do on defense is guard the three-point line. Both of these teams allowing their opponents to shoot between 31.2 and 32.5% from three-point range. Both of these teams in the top 50 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. With Vanderbilt, you've got the Tylers. Tyler Tanner has been your main scorer, 19 points, 3.5 boards, 5 assists, shoots about 37% from three. Nickel is the more efficient three-point shooter at about 40%. He throws in their 13.5 points per game, and then with the two Tylers along Duke Miles, and Miles gives you 16.5 points, 4 assists, 2.6 steals per game. They all do shoot at least 85.5% at the free throw line. That's big. And with this Vanderbilt team, they might not be the world's greatest team on the glass or well outside the top 150 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Arkansas has their warts as well, but they do have a guy in Jalen Washington who had double figures yesterday. He's been able to supply about 9.6 rebounds per game. Devin McLaughlin throws in there 10 points, 7 boards, but for Arkansas, I do think that the overall versatility of Trevon Brazile is going to be able to keep them lively in this game. He's supplying the team with 13 points, 7.5 boards, and he shoots about 35% from 3. And then Darius Acuff, I think, is the best player in this game. 22.5 points, 6.5 assists, shooting 44% from 3. Malik Thomas shoots 42% from the outside. For Arkansas, they're pretty good with their offense on the inside. They're a top 50 team with their 2-point shooting percentage on offense. On defense, it's well outside the top 250, so that's a little bit of an issue for them, but it is also an Arkansas team that's good at getting to the free throw line. They shoot 74.5% at the free throw line. Both of these teams do take great care of the ball. Vanderbilt is also a top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they also put you at the free throw line very frequently. A top 40 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. So I do like the under, sub by total 164, and 2.5 plus becomes my value point here on Arkansas. 647, 648 on the card. It is Wichita State and South Florida doing battle for the American title, and right now we are seeing an opener of South Florida being a 3.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 150.5. I'm willing to take 3.5 plus with Wichita State. I did set them as a 3-point underdog, and I do like this over because South Florida has been playing at absolute warp speed this year. Now Wichita State, much more of a mid-tempo team, 156th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. South Florida, number 3 in the nation, and both of these teams are going to be able to give themselves second and third chances on the glass. Now Wichita State, they have been well outside the top 250 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, so they're not necessarily the best shooting team in the world, but I mean, they are currently generating a offensive rebound on 38.5% of their missed shots away from home. Only Tennessee has a better road/neutral court offensive rebound percentage. Meanwhile, for South Florida, they are 14th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and it is a South Florida team that's going to give up some good looks from 3-point range. Right now, they are 227th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 34.7%. Now, Wichita State has actually been really good with their perimeter defense, 28th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and it is a South Florida team that's not shy in terms of pumping it up from 3-point range. Meanwhile, for South Florida, they've been a pretty good team on the inside with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, top 150 team with regards to road/neutral court 2-point shooting percentage, and I do love what Isaiah Nelson is able to bring to the table, averaging just below a double-double with about 16 points, 9.8 rebounds per game. Wes Enes, Joseph Pignon, they're your main two scorers out there in the backcourt. These two guys combine for about 30.8 points per game, and they combine to shoot about 37% from the outside. Joshua Machafo has been able to give you about 12 points, 5 boards, and then CJ Brown, nice versatile point guard with 11 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, and for South Florida, they've been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they lead the country in free throw attempts per game as well. Meanwhile, for Wichita State, this squad has been able to do a good job in terms of getting to the free throw line as well. Top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. They take great care of the ball. Top 70 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and while this team is not necessarily a prolific team on the inside with their 2-point shooting percentage outside the top 250, you do have some good 3-point shooting with having this team shooting about 33.5% from 3-point range. The main guy for this team is Keenan Giles. He gives you 38% 3-point shooting on about 19.5 points per game. Caron Boyd has been able to supply the team with about 11 points per contest, and then the Wilberg, a block and a half, 8.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. I think that he's going to be the most dominant presence in this game. With Wichita State, they don't put you under duress outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, so I do think that you get enough points here for the over. Semi total 153, and at 3.5 plus, I'm going to take those points with Wichita State and wrap things up with 649, 650. Purdue and Michigan do battle in Chicago, Illinois. With Michigan, they're 6.5 point favorites. Totals anywhere between 151 to 152.5, and I like the over. I set my total 154.5. Massive tempo war here. Michigan is 39th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Purdue, they are 335th, and both of these teams have been really efficient on the offensive side of things, with Purdue being the top of them. Second in the country in terms of points per possession because of their play around the outside. 17th in the country, shooting 38.2% from 3-point range. Top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, while Michigan, they are 3rd in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They are turning the ball over, though, about 185th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Despite that, they are 6th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Michigan certainly has been the better defense in these games. As for Michigan, right now they are 5th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it travels relatively well. It only drops to like 6th in games played away from home. Meanwhile, for Michigan, it has been made lackadaisical defense. They're outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage Overall, they're about 154th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it does go into the top 55 in a roadside shoot-score venue, and I do think that with Purdue having that backcourt play, they are going to be able to remain lively in this game. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, these two guys combined for about 28.5 points per game, and with Lawyer, he's shooting about 41.5% from three. Both shoot above 82.5% at the free throw line as well. With Smith, 9 assists and 2.8 turnovers per game. CJ Cox has been a nice player that has been lost in the shuffle of Lawyer and Smith, but still shoots 37% from three, gives you about 8.5 points per game, and then Trey Kaufman, Rent, Oscar Clough. They do combine for 16 rebounds per game. The one thing that Purdue has done a nice job of, not allowing second and third chances, top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Michigan has been one of your top rebounding teams in the country with having a trio of guys, Yaxel Lundeborg, Ade Mera, and Morris Johnson. I'll give you at least 6.9 rebounds per game between the three of them. You get over 5 blocks per game as well, and with Lundeborg, he's been your top scorer with about 14.5 points per game. Was a little bit touch and go over the last few games, but perhaps that 3 that he hit at the end of the game against Wisconsin, going to be able to get him going a little bit more. With LJ Kaysen out, we're noticing a little bit more Trey McKinney. Overall for the season, gives you about 8.5 points, shoots in the high 30s from three-point. Michigan, they're overall a top 50 team with their three-point shooting percentage at 36.4%, so I think that you have enough firepower for the over, but with the way that Purdue does a better job in terms of taking care of the ball, the way that they drain their threes, even with Michigan being a top 15 team with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage at about 29.7%, I do think that Purdue remains lively in this game, and I think that the late fellas get you over. So, semi-total 154.5, like the over on anything of 5+, we'll take those points with Purdue, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'll be with you guys every single day with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, and keep in mind, on the podcast tomorrow, it is the annual special where I give you my entire breakdown absolutely free on the podcast. I do not post it in like picture form or anything like that, so you can't just look on the old Twitter/X and copy my bracket, but I will go through round by round every single game that I pick. I have picked 3 out of last 6 national champions correct, so I pat myself on the back there. That does not matter now. We've got to pick it correct here, but you're going to be getting that on the podcast tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that, and I always appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much.